episode 85. I'm Tommy DiNucci here as always with my co-host Mikey Messier. Mike, how the hell are you, brother?
I'm doing good, Tommy. I'm here in sunny Jacksonville, Florida. It's seems like the summer's been going pretty strong with the heat and the humidity, and I keep thinking it's the end of the summer, but it's really just the halfway point, Tommy. So it's a little tough on me, but it'll be over soon enough.
Yeah, it's crazy. I can't believe it's already going to be August in a couple days. Here we are. The summer's rolling by, but like you said, Mikey, we got plenty of fun in the sun ahead. But it's going by really fast for me because I am officially today marks 48 days away from starting up on my next movie, Mike. That's the comedy that we were talking about last week on our comedy episode, which if you haven't checked that one out, go back in the archives and watch episode 84 because I'm gearing up for a funny movie, Mike, in just really like a handful of weeks.
Yeah, I mentioned the topic to a couple of people. Curling. If I can we say that at least, or is that okay to say?
Yeah, I think we can say that.
So I think people that I've mentioned it to got a smile out of that because immediately they saw the humor in it. Because I think just a lot of people don't understand the sport of curling, Tommy. Like I mean I've watched it a few times, and it is, to us Americans at least, it seems a little foreign. It's people kind of shoving around a kind of a puck type thing with a broom type thing, and so I think in the spirit of dodgeball and other sports comedies of that nature, I think you might have yourself a crackerjack here, buddy.
Well, I sure hope so, brother. It's a really funny sport. It's really like it's a combination of like shuffleboard, a little bit of almost like darts on the ice. It's like if you took darts and shuffleboard and put them on the ice. That's kind of what curling is. So it's a very interesting sport that again I don't think a lot of people know a lot about it, but it's definitely one of those Olympic sports that I feel like when you just casually flipping through the channels and you might stumble upon the Winter Olympics, when you see this sport on TV, you almost have to stop for a second. There's that curiosity factor that hits you where you're kind of like, what are these people doing? And we really give away gold medals for this. All right. Well, hey. But yeah, so we're excited about that. We're 48 days away. So my days have been jam packed lately, man. There's just been like I wake up, I do my little workout to help quiet the voices in my head, and then once they shut up, I can get to work, and I'll start, kind of just getting right into storyboarding. This is the first movie that I'm doing like a full set of storyboards for almost every scene, since I have a little time to prep. So, uh, don't have to be Norman Rockwell to draw great storyboards. Real simple drawings, just putting them together to try and just wrap my head around this movie, Mike. So we're kind of in our, you could say, like the Rocky training montage aspect of filmmaking now, where we're just gearing up and getting ready for the fight as Kim Kaling checks in with us. What's up, Kim? It's good to have you here with us on Day in Action.
Well, Tommy,
Um,
you mentioned Mickey from. I think you mentioned Mickey from the Rocky movies. So
yeah, look at
uh,
that hat you have. That's pretty
it-
cool.
this is like a headpiece. This is Mighty Mick. I don't know if you can see his full face, but Burgess Meredith was the actor, right, that played Mickey
Sure.
from the Rocky films, from the original. When did he got killed off in the third one of the original? It's funny, man, Tommy. I went to see the Wolverine and Deadpool movie the other night, and when I was leaving, a teenage kid who was working at the theater complimented me on my T-shirt because I was wearing a T-shirt that just had the Rocky movie logo, and the
Hmm.
kid told me that that's his favorite. The way he put it, like that's my favorite franchise. So it's just interesting how like different generations, like he doesn't even see it as just a singular film. He sees it as a whole.
It's a franchise to him. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
but I mean, back in the day, people just said, "Oh, Rocky, Rocky 1, 2, and 3." But now it's
Yeah.
you just
Well, when we were
automatically
kids,
think of a franchise.
yeah, when we were kids, the term franchise didn't really apply to many movies. There really weren't these big franchises. So, yeah, that is pretty crazy. But hey, cool to see that, in 2024, there's a kid who, still thinks Rocky is relevant. That movie came out in what, 1976. So, hey, we like to see that. But today we're going to be talking about a different type of Mick that's also mighty in certain ways. And that's a movie that Mike both you and I worked on called The Mick and the Trick. This is a movie that Mike and I shot smack dab. We were working on this smack dab in the middle of the pandemic back in 2020. And I must mention that this was, as I like to call it, pre-vax pandemic era. The vaccine had not even come out yet. So COVID was still very much this mystery virus that people were trying to wrestle, and they were working on the vax. But when we shot this movie, there was no vaccine, so we don't have to go into all that. But I'm sure everyone remembers what that was like, especially from a filmmaking standpoint, where you got the masks, you got the tests, you got to be testing every so often. I think we had a test depending upon whether you were directly on set or whether you were like more of a periphery type crew person. You had to test either every day or every other day. So it was a big thing. So this movie was both scary to shoot in a sense because, we were all kind of around people for the first time in a few months. It was this whole new thing, but also exciting. It was exciting because we had been cooped up for so long. I don't know about you, but I couldn't wait to get back on a movie set and get to action. So this movie represents a lot of kind of a big moment where we kind of come out of the house and get to work.
Tommy, it was filmed in October 2020, and I can say that pretty definitely because I chronicled my trip to meet you in North Reading, Pennsylvania. At the time, I was doing the subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel that I later broke up into different channels, and I chronicled the road trip up there to
Right.
meet you and see everybody. And also, I did have to go to the great city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for a COVID test, which was 2.5 hours outside of North Reading where the film shoot was. And then, I love Philadelphia, but it was a bit out of the way. And I was doing this all by car trip. And then getting to the hotel, I saw our buddy there, Fred Sullivan, in the hotel parking lot. I'm trying to point to the
Oh, there
picture
he
of
is.
Fred.
He's
Yeah.
right above your shoulder there.
And so are you. You're kind of growing out of my right ear. And then I'm
I
growing
am.
out of my own left ear. Anyway,
Oh
it's
yeah,
hard to
we're all
point
back there.
with this thing.
You got to go
Um,
opposite.
yeah, it always throws. If you ever try to comb your hair when you're on like streaming cameras, it's difficult. But in any regard, buddy, I remember showing up to the hotel in North Reading, Pennsylvania, and it was like, what was it called? Like the Sacco Hotel and Conference Center, something like that. It was not like a Howard Johnson's or whatever. It wasn't like a national chain. It was like a singular hotel, which it was nice, but had to do things. We had to check in the parking lot because they didn't even have the lobby open. And like you said, Tommy, this was October of 2020, so there was no vaccine. There was no hint of a vaccine. People were very stressed out. I was here in Florida where I thought we had some, regiments for vaccine times or pre-vaccine times for um, this virus. But going up north with every state I drove up, Tommy, the restrictions were tighter. The freedoms, so to speak, or can you eat in a fast food restaurant or do you have to take it to go? All that stuff as I drove up north through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina into Pennsylvania, it just got more restrictions, more restrictions. And it was just really intense. And it was a time
It was
of
a challenging time to make a movie, nonetheless, but just a challenging time to live. But imagine, again, you've got basically like the Screen Actors Guild, which is kind of shepherding all these projects. And now, just like you said, you can't go into a fast food restaurant. You think McDonald's is strict. You can imagine how the Screen Actors Guild treats this. So it was really crazy. People can't really truly imagine what it was like to make a movie while having to again. I remember moments where there was a COVID officer on set. How about that? Like, I bet you a lot of people might have already forgotten that there was one person in the crew's job that was just designated to be the COVID officer. And basically, in the morning, you would check in with them. They would either administer your test or make sure that you had a test that you could show them that, look, I'm good to go. And then you'd have to sign up your name, and then they would take your temperature, even with the test that said you were good. Just to get in the elevator to go upstairs, you'd take your temperature and then you'd get in. And then during the day, the COVID officer would kind of literally police the set, walking around. Like I remember being in, if you were to congregate in a group of say 2 or 3 or 4 people and you're just bullshitting, talking about a scene or just talking about whatever, the COVID officer would come up to you and just politely be like, "Hey guys, let's distance a little bit. We got to socially distance. Keep that 6 feet." So they would actually enforce this shit on set and tell you like, "Hey guys, let's break it up a little bit. You're a little too close for comfort." So it was real. It was a real thing. But let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about how this all started. Um, I was working on this. I was kind of working on a documentary at the time called Knockout Blonde. Um, and I was excited to work on Knockout Blonde because Knockout Blonde allowed me to the big thing, have a job during COVID, meaning like, I'm able to pay the rent, as they say. And B, it was a documentary. So, as you all know, documentaries don't require these massive crews. They don't require, you can shoot a documentary with a couple people.
Right.
So I was still in the filmmaking mode, but I had really been missing the kind of on-set excitement, the energy, the narrative style of storytelling, working with actors to tell a story. I missed that a lot. It had been a while at this point. So I remember getting this call and I got hooked up. It was actually Joe Cantor of all people. We've heard a few stories about Joe Cantor. Uh, Anyone who's worked on my movies knows Joe really well. He's kind of known as the affectionately called like the sound wizard. He's this very unique character who has always been in my corner. Really talented guy, very knowledgeable, and I got to say, he hooked me up on this one. I got a call from him who I normally don't get business calls from Joe. Usually he just calls to check in. But I got a call one day and he was like, "Hey, Tommy, I'm on to do this movie. It's in Pennsylvania and they're looking for a director. And the producer that I'm working with has actually seen Vault recently." And I told him that I know the guy who directed Vault. My movie Vault with Chaz Palminteri and Theo Rossi
Don
had just
Johnson.
come. Yeah, Don Johnson. That movie had just come out probably like a year prior, maybe 2 years prior. So this guy knew about me. He had seen my movie and he wanted me to direct his movie. Now I was, of course, a little hesitant because this is coming from Joe, and like I said, I love Joe, but he never, it's not like he's not an agent. So, but my advice to any filmmaker out there, and it's wasted some time in my life, but I'd say for every bit of time I wasted, I made it back tenfold with cash. I turn over every stone. If I even think that there might be an inkling to a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I'm going to have a 5 or 10 minute call with the person and suss them out and see if there's anything there, even if it seems like it could be complete bullshit and a waste of time.
I did this
What do you
little
do?
leprechaun yesterday, buddy.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Little leprechaun looking for his pot of gold, Tommy.
That was me. So, see, Mike, that's basically Mike has illustrated my story. That's me looking for my little pot of gold. I got Joe Cantor calling me up. This might be suspect, but I'll check it out. So I make a call and I end up on the phone with a guy by the name of Robert Morlago and his partner, Oz Gomez. Robert and Oz were really just starting off at the time. They had never done much of anything. I mean, they had taken some acting classes, they had worked on some short films and music videos and things like that. So they had a little bit of experience. But as far as writing their own script, producing their own movie, and also acting in the movie, these guys were kind of wearing all the hats. So Robert and Oz were really the powerhouse behind this movie. They put together the funds. They did everything. So I got on the phone with Robert and I got to talking with him, and he pitched me the script. It sounded like something that was right up my alley. It was a crime drama, and it was kind of unique too because it was a bit of a story of these two unlikely friends that kind of come together. And in a minute, we'll go into the story itself, but I'm just setting up how I got involved. And basically, I kind of thought it was cool. It was a cool concept, and I, told them my rate. We negotiated a rate, and it was a really fair rate. They were going to pay me really well to go down to Pennsylvania and direct this movie. So I was stoked. Like I was very excited, and I also appreciated the fact that although this was their party, this was their show, they were very open and willing to listen to any advice that I had from a production standpoint, from a casting standpoint. This is one of those things, and we've dealt with this before. We talked about it on the show, but sometimes you come onto a project and there are certain characters that are already cast, and it's just kind of out of your hands. It's like, all right, this is the team that you're going to have to coach up. They were already these players were already on the team. You have to just work with what you got. Well, Robert and Oz had cast a few characters, but there was a lot of open spots, and I'm very thankful for them still to this day that they trusted me, uh, really without any kind of It's not like they were like, oh, well, we got to put him on tape. I said, look, you got to cast this guy. You got to cast this guy. This guy's great. I love working with this guy. This guy's super talented, and they let me cast probably like 5 or 6 people from outside of the Pennsylvania area, and allowed me to, provided that they were willing to drive themselves to Pennsylvania, they would put them up in a hotel and get them paid. So I really appreciated that. So to go down the list, one of those guys is sitting right next to me. Mikey was recruited to play a part. Fred Sullivan, who's above Mike's left shoulder, was recruited to play a part. My dear friend Tom Glenn who's also a Florida man, came
That's
up
his arm.
from. Yeah, that is wow, that is Tom's arm right there. Dude, all my guys are in the shot. Tom came up. John Fiore came in. He came down from Massachusetts to be a part of this one. And really, I'm probably missing a couple other. Oh,
I got
Nick
Nick.
Principe came in
Yes,
to be involved in the movie,
Nick
and did some stunts.
Armengaro.
Armin Garrow. Wow, dude, like 6. This is a hell of a cast that we brought in here. If you talk
Yeah,
about, that's a nice group of actors right there. Armin Garrow came in and was a part of it and did just a really phenomenal, hilarious scene. As far as crew goes, I was able to bring my assistant at the time, Robbie Savage, with me. I was really happy to hear that they were willing to bring him on and get him involved in the project. So that meant a lot to me that not only were they willing to bring me on and as they say didn't beat me up over the rate. They trusted me to kind of bring some interesting players into the mix. So I cast a lot of my friends and a lot of people that I knew I could trust. And look, this wasn't one of those things where it's not like these guys were getting paid millions of dollars. It was a fair rate. It was scale, for SAG. But I could tell, like when I called all my friends up, when I called those guys up, I could tell that, like me, they were just so eager to get out of the house and work on something. I mean, you can imagine the mind of an actor just sitting in their house all day long. It's a little stir crazy for them. So these guys couldn't have been happier to get out of the house, go on a little road trip. Like I said, I mean, Fred Sullivan came from Rhode Island. That's a 6, 7 hour car ride. You drove up from Florida. That sounds like what, a day or two in the car, probably.
Took me 2 days at least. I know that I stayed probably at an Airbnb in North Carolina the first night, and
Yeah.
but I enjoyed it, Tommy, because I was happy to see you. This was the first time that you and I had hung out in person since I moved to Florida. Because when I did, I thought I'd be coming up to Rhode Island all the time, but didn't realize we had our friend the pandemic. Nobody saw that coming, buddy. So I was happy to be there. I was happy to get the call from you. I appreciated the work and I appreciated the friendship just being there. And am I having a delusional moment? Was Jonathan Del Ponte one of your go-to guys? Was he there in Pennsylvania, or am I just imagining that?
No, I think you're just so used to Jonathan being around that you probably just you Mandela affected him. I almost said Nelson Mandela affected him, but I don't think that's what it's called. That's a
Yeah.
totally different guy altogether. But yeah, no, John was not there, but he's always there in spirit. But yeah, this was a great time because, so all right, so we get down to Pennsylvania and we arrive on set. I meet Robert, I meet Oz, and they tell me that, okay, well, we've got Peter Green in the movie. Now, Peter Green is a very talented actor. He really is. I think he's one of those guys that, if you just go by like raw ability, he's off the charts. He reminds me of like a Tom Sizemore in the sense that these guys just have this ability in them. But there were also some other challenges with Peter that we'll get into later that potentially resulted in a lot of strife on set. well, it didn't potentially result in, it did result in a lot of strife on set. There were some, you know, banging of the proverbial heads, not just with me, but also with the producers. And he was tough, man. You know, but we got what we had to get out of him. And I'm not one of those guys that really likes to sit there and dwell on it. You know, at the end of the day, I know he was going through a lot. Listen, there's a lot of pressure that goes with being the lead in a movie. You know, there really is. So I understand that, you know, he was probably going through it on his end too. But I met Peter Green, and we started kind of just chatting about this character and laying it all out. And you know, let's just talk a little bit about the story here, because one of the real kind of cast members that to me really shines in this movie is it really is just a solid cast, but Jazz Villa, who played the Trick, if you will.
Right.
I met Jazz, you know, early on, probably the second night I got there, and I remember just being like, "Wow, this guy's just loaded with charisma." Jazz was just really funny. Um, hadn't spent a lot of time in America. I want to say he's from Cuba. So you know, to him, like being here was just really exciting. He told me it was like kind of like another world. You know, he's like, you take for granted all the things that you have here. It was kind of funny to hear him say that. You know, here we are in the middle of the pandemic, where like as Americans, we feel as though like we got things kind of, you know, like we don't have everything's kind of shut down and we're living in the. Whereas Jazz coming from Cuba was like, oh, this is fucking amazing what you guys have over here.
Cuba.
So yeah, he was really cool to work with. Um, but just yeah, you know, in terms of like the cast itself, like Charles W. Harris the third, I met Charles down there, and Charles and I have since really hit it off, and he's been up to Rhode Island to be in a couple of my movies. He was in Johnny and Clyde. He was just recently in a movie I directed called Last Tenant. Um, Emma Tedeschi. That's another person I forgot to mention. Emma Tedeschi's a local actress from Rhode Island who there's a girl who's just for like a year messaged me. It was like, I'll do anything. I need a part. You know, like whatever any role you want. Let me audition for it. Like I really, I think I can, add some value here. And I had this part for her, and it was a kind of a cool like, almost like part of this like gang of is like a female gang that kind of roams the streets. And it was a pretty cool part. She gets to beat someone up with a baseball bat. And I remember calling her up and be like, hey, listen, I know you've always said that you want to get involved. Well, I do have a part for you, but it's in Pennsylvania. Like, would you be willing to come down here and you're going to make the ride and all that? And she couldn't have been more thrilled and was happy to be a part of it. Monique Dupre, we forgot to mention. She's another person that I put in the mix. Not a local. I think she was coming from New York, but she's someone that I've worked with in the past. And she's also got some pro wrestling background. And she was involved in that kind of stunt sequence with all those that female gang there that I was talking about. Um, and also Federico Casta. Let me say this right, and I'm Italian, so I should be able to say this. Federico Castelluccio, who you might remember from the television show The Sopranos. He played Furio on The Sopranos, who, quick Sopranos backstory. Furio was the sort of Tony's right hand man from Italy, but also Tony's wife started to take a liking to Furio, and there was a little bit of little tension there. And Furio's he was well, Federico, I should say, is a handsome guy, so I don't blame Mrs. S for taking a liking to him. But Federico was really great to work with and kind of anchored down the movie a little bit. Remember, I told you Peter was a little bit up and down, a little unpredictable. Federico was you could kind of set your watch to him and was real nice and easy to work with. But Mike, let's get into kind of the backstory a little bit. I'm going to read this right off of IMDb here. The Mick the Trick, an Irish hitman working for a Cuban crime boss in the IRA, tries to leave his life of crime with the help of a savvy hooker. So Peter Green plays the IRA hitman. Jazz Villa plays the savvy hooker. And these two are kind of, it's an unlikely pairing. I've said it before, I'll say it 1,000 times. I love unlikely pairings. To
The
me, they
odd
make
couple.
Yeah, the odd couples are always kind of, my favorites. They make the best well, from a story standpoint, not to get too into this, it's just I kind of, as much as I appear to be grouchy and crotchety, I like to think that most people can eventually find a common ground. And if you meet someone right away, you might, knee jerk reaction, be like, I don't know about this guy, or I don't know about this person, whatever. But I love seeing people kind of come together despite what their backgrounds may be, or despite what society might say that, oh, these two people shouldn't be friends. Well, I love stories when those two people become friends, and not just become friends, but actually accomplish something really great together. And that's
Hey,
kind of what I loved about the story.
Hey, Tommy, we should definitely mention, because I think we failed to do so, that this movie can be streamed for free right now on Tubi. It's TUBI. Is that the name of the app, the streaming service?
Tubi, of course. A lot of people might not realize this. A lot of people knock Tubi, and I don't get it. But people seem to think Tubi is a less than product, and I'm just, it drives me nuts because most people don't realize that Tubi was literally the number one most watched platform on the fucking planet was Tubi. So it's really exciting that we're on Tubi with this movie. And yeah, I think that if you haven't seen it and you're looking for something to kind of again, it's a real light watch. Check it out on Tubi. But yeah, an Irish hitman working for a Cuban crime boss in the IRA tries to leave his life of crime with the help of a savvy hooker. So you've got these two kind of unlikely partners. Everyone's trying to kill them, and they have no choice but to kind of join up. What I like about this story is, our main sort of Cuban crime boss, Oz Gomez. I mean, Robert Morlago plays him, and Robert did a really great job. I mean, it's like I said, aside from producing the film, he played this part and he played it really well. Uh, and basically, he's after the Peter Green character, the Mick,
The Mick.
and he basically recruits the help of every gangbanger in town and puts a target on his back. And now Peter Green's character only has one person he can trust, and that's Jasvia's character,
The
affectionately
trick.
known as Sugar. Well, her name's Sugar in the
Yeah,
movie.
right. Put in the title.
Um,
And
yeah, and the title character of the trick, which I gotta say, when I first came onto this project, I was I wouldn't say I was sure, but I was fairly confident that the name was going to change because
right.
the Mick could be construed as an offensive term for an Irish person. I mean, and the trick uh, could be construed as an offensive term for sex workers. So it was kind of like, wow, that one made it.
I think it's an interesting time, Tommy, and I know we're all kind of walking on broken glass with our, you know, not trying to offend anyone, not trying to get canceled, not trying to get hashtagged, but there's also a backlash of that as well. And I think at some point, people just realize if there's not malicious intent behind a word, if that's just a catchy title, it's just a catchy title. You could say that a banana is a bent fruit if you wanted to, but it's still a banana at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So yeah, basically this was a fun time, Mike. It was a fun time, but I think we should get into some of the fun stories from set because there were a lot of them. Again, I don't want to make this a Peter bashing session by any means, but I'd be disappointed in myself if I didn't mention one of the strangest things I've ever seen, where Peter was demanding a cheeseburger at one point, and things just got really out of hand. And Peter took the cheeseburger and actually he flung it at one of our producers, and it struck him. And I'll never forget the burger. It was kind of like out of a movie itself. Like the patty of the burger actually like came out of the bun, slapped him on the like chest, and like stuck there for a minute, and then
Right.
flopped down. And he just like lost his shit. Um, so there were a lot of things like that on set. I think I've told the story before where I had to lie to Peter and tell him that I was a
Jujitsu.
I was a brown belt in jujitsu, because he threatened to punch me. And I was like, well, I don't think that's a good idea, Peter, because if you punch me, I'll break your fucking arm in front of the entire crew. And he backed off, and believe me, glad he didn't actually punch me, because that could have got ugly. So yeah, this was just like a wild kind of movie. We were shooting a lot of overnights. And we were shooting in a lot of interesting locations. Like I remember the location we were filming in for the most part was this giant warehouse, which had been kind of cannibalized into many other smaller businesses and warehouses, and there were apartments within this whole complex, art spaces, practice spaces for bands. It was a really wacky building. I kind of never experienced anything like it before, where it's like, oh, people live here. There's businesses. We're shooting a movie here. It was a huge building. Like it was probably a 10-story building, and I remember one of the scenes required us to be on the roof. And forgive me if I'm going all over the place here on this one, but I just have so many Mick and the Trick memories. I want to get as many of them in this hour as I can. I remember us being on the rooftop looking at where we were going to shoot this scene on the roof. And I was I'm terrified of heights, so I was afraid to be up there. And it was one of those roofs where like there's no railing. There's no overhang. There's no, it's not like, sometimes like you're on a roof where like you walk up and there's a wall that's like up to your waist that you can like look over. No, this thing went fucking flat, straight across, straight drop down.
Straight to death.
And it was about, like I said, maybe 10 stories up, which is, 10 stories doesn't
It'll
sound
kill
high
you.
until you're fucking standing 100 feet in the air looking down without an awning or an overhang or anything.
Yeah.
So we're up there, and I got to shoot this pretty elaborate scene up on the roof, and it's nighttime. And I just remember looking around on the roof and just being like, guys, do we have like safety harnesses? Do we have like things like that? I was like, well, not quite, and but we could kind of maybe keep the action to this part of the roof. And I remember just being like, that doesn't work for me, brother. And we moved the scene to somewhere maybe like just a story off the ground. There was like another part of the building that hung over. So it's like, yeah, we're 10, 20 feet in the air, but we don't need to be up there because, again, like it's all fun and games until someone gets severely injured or dies. And that's one of those situations where I just imagine being on that roof and having some grip, carrying a C-stand, and someone turns and moves out of the way and they don't realize there's an overhand. They don't realize you're 3 feet from pay dirt. So basically, and again, that's what was so cool about Robert and Oz. This was their first movie, and they didn't have a lot of experience with stuff like that. And anytime that I was like, "Hey guys, I think that this is dangerous," or "Hey guys, I'm not sure if this is the right move for us," they were super supportive of it, and they understood and they embraced it. And I think they learned a lot on this movie, and I think they became really great producers by the end of it. I think it was like a bit of a crash course in production for them. Um, I remember after the first day of shooting, Robert and I had like a little bit of a sit down in Oz, and we just looked at the script, and we were kind of like, it's almost like preseason, to make a sports reference. You play your preseason games; they don't count for anything. And if you lose them, it's okay, but you need to recognize, like, all right, we got a little beat up here.
Right.
We got beat up because of this, and this. So I remember the first day was successful, but it was a simple day, and I knew we had some really challenging days coming up. For example, there was a really big car chase in the movie, and I remember I had to sit down with Robert and Oz, uh, and I just said, "Look, guys, there's a lot in this movie coming up." I think it was a 12-day shoot or an 11-day shoot. I was like, we got 11, 12 days left. I don't see how we're feasibly going to be able to film this stuff. Like these car chases, they're really technical. We don't have the right stunt drivers, things like that. I think we got to make this car chase a really elaborate foot chase. We have this really cool building. It's like, again, I say this all the time for upcoming producers and directors. Fuck what you don't have and focus on what you do have. Like, oh, you don't have a really great stunt team that can pull off precision driving. don't shoot a driving scene because it's not going to look good. It's going to look like
Right.
shit. It's going to look like, a force. You're going to be trying to bite off more than you can chew.
I
But
got
what you
my
do have,
I got my car chase scene from Wish type of thing.
yeah, and it's like, well, again, that's what I mean. Like, fuck what you don't have and focus on what you do have. You don't have this precision team, but what you do have is you have this kind of labyrinthian building with all these unique hallways and fire escapes and stairwells. Let's use that. Let's lean into that shit because we know we got it. We know that, if the worst thing happens, someone's going to trip and fall. They're not going to smash into each other and kill each other in these cars. So we did a lot of that, and that's to me like what Oz and Robert were best at. They adapted really well, and it was cool. They let me kind of work on some of these scenes with them, and we rewrote a bunch of stuff, and we got it so that it was manageable for the rest of the shoot. So that was a big day for me. I remember sitting down with them and kind of having that. I want to say that we did something crazy. Like it might have been like an off day. I think we like shot a day, then had an off day. It was something weird setup like that. And on that off day, all we did was rewrite the script and get it manageable. But it was like I had to get down to Pennsylvania and like see what I'm working with before I could really make those adjustments. Because I know what people are thinking. Well, why didn't you make all these changes weeks ahead of time in pre-production? The reality is you don't always know what you're up against until you actually physically see it. Normally you try to get down on the ground and have at least a couple weeks of prep. I think I got down to Pennsylvania on a Friday and we started shooting on a Monday. Like we're talking like we had like 2 or 3 prep days. So
Well,
we had to cram a lot in a little bit of time.
yeah, Tommy, I do remember something, and I'll just hint at it, and you can say as much as you want or not. But I remember I got there, and the basically the night that I got there, there was a change in the crew, so to speak. I don't know if you want to talk about that or if that's off topic, but I
I don't
think
know
that's what
legally
led
what I'm
to
able to talk about, but I know that there
yeah.
was there was a producer on the movie that had been dealing with a lot of the crew and a lot of the aspects of the crew, and I know that that producer left after the first night. So there was a little bit of drama there. It's one of those, if you were there, you were there. I don't think I should really say it on this platform here, but yeah, there was a bit of a regime change early on, and whenever anything like that happens in any business, whether you're running a movie set or a restaurant, when there's a management change, there's going to be a shakeup, and in this case, it was a very positive shakeup. When we shook it up, the right pieces fell into place, and we were able to shoot the movie because, frankly, if we were going at it the way we were planning on going at it, we just wouldn't have been able to finish the movie on time and on budget, And again, like as the director, that's not always my problem, as they say. I'm not the producer. If it goes over budget, it does. Okay, what do you want me to do about it? But in this case, like I really wanted Robert and Oz to get across the finish line, so it was a no-brainer for me to say, all right, well, let's fix this.
And let me just jump in for a minute, buddy, on this one, because I remember that from an actor's perspective, like we're kind of like, hey, what's going on here, and kind of just waiting for direction. But I think with myself, having worked with you a couple of times under some stressful circumstances and seeing you in action, kind of cooler head prevails. You're pretty good with the Zen director stuff. I'll give you credit, buddy. And I think with Oz and the other gentleman, they basically saw that you had done such a good job with Vault, and here you are on their production. You're in the middle of the pandemic, and you're basically just leveling with them and speaking to them with respect and saying, hey, this car chase scene, we might go crazy working on it. It's the middle of a pandemic. We're not going to get much sympathy from the people in this area trying to do a car scene for a movie. This is not Hollywood. We're in North Reading, Pennsylvania. And they probably just trusted you. I think that was the word that you were kind of looking for, is they trusted you to direct the film. And sometimes you have to kind of weigh your options here. You have this wonderful location. I was kind of pointing to the back, Tommy, because this photograph was taken in that building. And as a matter of
Hmm.
fact, if people do want to do their research on this film, the trailer is on YouTube. It's actually kind of a longer trailer. It's 2 minutes and 42 seconds. the trailer, and then, like we said, you can watch the whole thing on Tubi. And then the IMDb page actually has some behind the scenes photographs that you took some, I took some. This one, I think, was with your phone, but you didn't take the picture because you're in it. And then there's a nice picture of me and you having a celebratory like toast together as I was leaving the set. So from my perspective, Tommy, like for instance, and things have to, and when you're an actor too, you have to be up for adapting. I remember I got there and I was only supposed to be on the set for one day as an actor and have 2 nights in the hotel, and then I was going to be gone. Well, some changes happened, and basically you brought me in for another scene, this scene, to establish my character, which I thought was really smart, because then instead of just having one scene and I'm out of the movie, I had like a seed, like my character was planted, which was really smart. And then I actually ended up spending like an extra 8 days in the hotel watching the World Series. I think it was the first World Series of the pandemic era. And
Yeah, it's
basically,
so funny, man. I forgot all about that. You were just supposed to be a little in and out, and you made like a mini vacation out of it. We even like took a drive to like Amish country one day on
yeah,
an off day. You remember that?
yeah,
Mike and
I
I.
did.
So
Yeah,
so quick backstory. I used to believe it or not, every other summer I would go to Amish country with my family growing up. We would go. My parents just loved that Amish cooking. I guess yeah, it was fun. We make a little trip out of it. We'd go to Hershey Park, Pennsylvania. My dad's a huge Civil War buff, so he'd take us to Gettysburg. We'd do the whole battlefield tour. So that was like our every other summer thing. And we were in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is only it was one of those things where I kind of like I'm like, yeah, how far are we from Lancaster? And I GPSed it, and I was like, oh my god, we're like 40 minutes from like where I had literally like a dozen childhood vacations. And I remember on one of the off days, I was like, Mike, you want to take a ride with me? And he was like, yeah, sure. And it was such a like, this used to be my playground moment. I remember Mike and I drove up to this place called Dutch Wonderland, which at one time was like this really cute amusement park for kids when I was a little kid, and it was of course shut down for pandemic and run down as fuck. I mean, it literally looked like a human being hadn't been in there and probably had been a year, but it looked like 5 years. Like the place was kind of
right.
dilapidated. And I remember just like being in the parking lot, kind of just being like this weird feeling when you see like almost like seeing a part of your childhood like age out, wither away, and die. And I'm just like, wow, Mike, can I tell you, buddy, it ain't like I remembered it. And then it sucked too because it was a Sunday, and I remember like in Amish country, as you can imagine, like everything shut down on Sunday, so we couldn't even get into the Waffle House. I think we had a tough time. It was probably because of the pandemic too. But either way, it was a nice little drive we took through the cornfields, Mike.
No, and I remember I did take some videos and some photographs, and we did actually see like the Amish people with the horse and buggy, and it was wild. And on one of my many off days, because I mean I worked for 2 days and I had the hotel for 8, so I went to some, I called it like a Zen garden, but it was like a Chinese restaurant on a top of a hill or a mountain in North Reading, and I took a really
Oh
cool video.
yeah, yeah. I remember that.
I have the video up now on the One Mike Messier YouTube channel, because I'm basically walking around and it's like the Chinese restaurant wasn't even open. I think there was a food truck out there, but people were so looking for something to do. People would just go to this Chinese restaurant because it was on top of a mountain type of thing with an overlook. And
Well, I think let me just jump in there. You're doing it a disservice, brother. It was not just a Chinese restaurant. It was a legit fucking pagoda on a side of a mountain. Like when I say pagoda, like go into your iPhone and you know type in the word pagoda if you don't know what that is. It's one of those massive, tall kind of Chinese buildings. And it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. And you say to yourself, like, why is this here? What is
right.
this doing on this? And it probably was what, Mike, like 3 or 4 stories high. Like it was very tall. It was huge pagoda.
Yeah, I've got the video on. Like I said, I recently put that on One Mike Messier because it was such an interesting Zen walk, I called it. And I remember that same day I did laundry, like just doing a load of laundry at a laundromat and having to wear the mask and go in there and introduce myself and all that stuff. And and just little things that we take for granted, like doing laundry in a laundromat, was like an exciting thing because we were in the pandemic. But no, Tommy, I think you handled yourself well. And Robert and Oz, I'm sorry, I forgot. Is that the names are Robert and Oz, right?
Yeah, you got
Um,
it.
yeah, they handled themselves very well. I just had a little laugh because I think Dr. Oz, isn't his first name Bob? Isn't it Robert? The TV doctor, isn't his name
You
Robert
know,
Oz?
I'm familiar with Dr. Oz. I just know him as the TV guy. I don't know what his first name is. I could be very right on that one, buddy.
Yeah. So I mean, but those guys, look, they were under a lot of stress, and actors can get very anxious when it comes to like, hey, is my hotel going to be covered, or what's going on here, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, at the end of the night, trial by fire, man. Kudos to Robert, Oz, yourself, the whole team, because we're, we're doing this in October of 2020. There's no vaccine in sight. This is not Hollywood, California. This is not New York City. This is not a town that's used to making movies, and people are here making a movie. And eventually, Tommy, I think this movie premiered at some festival in North Reading or Allentown. Wasn't there like a
No, I think,
local
well,
festival
they
or
might
something?
have done one there. They did a premiere in New York at one point, but it was more of like a special screening because remember, the movie literally just came out 3 or 4 weeks ago. So this is all pretty new. But it's funny, man. I'm enjoying talking about making the trick here, but we really have barely scraped the surface, Mike. I feel like there's a lot more to this topic, and we might just have to revisit this next week in a part two and just wrap her up. Do you feel
Well,
like
I
there's
think
more meat on the bone here?
I think so, and I think what I can we can also do, buddy, is we can encourage people. Kim Kaling has chimed in, and
Hmm.
uh, and I think we should just encourage people in the week that we have from now until next week. You have the whole 6 nights, 7 nights, whatever it is. Go to Tubi. If you haven't downloaded Tubi, like it's on the like for me, buddy, I'm watching this thing on a huge TV in my bedroom. It's a free thing. If you have, I don't even have cable TV, but through streaming, through Wi-Fi, you can get Tubi for free on pretty much every TV. If not, you can get it on your laptop, your desktop, whatever. Get Tubi and watch the Mick and the Trick. And you can also watch the preview there on YouTube for free. And you can go to IMDb and look up the Mick and the Trick. I did want to say one little quirky thing, buddy, is we talked about Peter, and I it's just interesting, Tommy. We have perspectives. You have a much deeper perspective of this movie as a director than I did as a day player, essentially. But when I got to meet Peter Green, I was really on the fence. Do I share this little silly thing with him? Or it's not silly, but he played Zed in the movie Pulp Fiction. Like
Oh,
the
I know where
movie,
this is going.
yeah, the movie Pulp Fiction, when Bruce, and this is like, to me, it's the top of the charts for this movie, is Bruce Willis avenges Vin Rom, who's been compromised by the Gimp and Zed, and Bruce Willis kills him with a big knife, the big sword, the samurai sword, and this movie, for various reasons, meant a lot to me, Pulp Fiction, and I ended up getting a tattoo, which I could show it to you, but my foot would take up the whole screen. But basically, the tattoo on my ankle has the samurai sword, and the tattoo reads "Zed is dead," which is a reference to Pulp Fiction. And so, flash forward many years later, I'm sitting here on a set, and you're telling me that Peter Green's in this the star of the movie, and I'm looking him up, and I'm like, oh wait a minute, that's the guy who played Zed, and I've got Zed tattooed on my ankle, and I'm like, how many times do you have this situation? And I guess for me it's two, because I also got the Pillman tattoo, but I with Zed I had to just tell Peter Green, my final meal of the set when I'm leaving North Reading, I just had to say, hey, and I told him the story, and he wasn't jumping up and down about it, but he
Yeah,
was
what was
respect.
his so what was the reaction? So you go up to him at lunch,
Well, we're
you
already having lunch. I
yank
didn't go up to him.
your all right, so you're eating lunch with him. You're sitting down eating lunch with him.
A
You tell him
meal
the
of some
story.
kind.
You slide that pant leg up. You show that ankle of yours off. You flash the tattoo. What does he say to you?
He acknowledged it with a bit of a non emotional, respectful acknowledgement without really showing enthusiasm nor rejection. It was kind of like, okay, another person who dug Pulp Fiction. I don't think he was disrespectful anyway. I think it was just kind of like he's seen other crazy stuff in his life,
So
and this was
would
just.
you say he was fairly unfazed by it?
I think he didn't show his hand. Let's put it that way. But I
Hmm,
didn't find it to be neither disrespectful nor enthusiastic. It was an acknowledgement, and I think the way that I introduced the topic was such that I kind of gave him enough preparation where he wasn't going to be shocked by it because I kind of explained
right.
to him. So he was cool with it. I would say he was cool with it. My interpretation of Peter was fine. I think I had a pretty good scene with him and um, Federico. But like I said, man, it's just interesting how perceptions work. From my vantage point, just working with him for one shoot, one shot, and having that little limited stuff, I'd say, oh, Peter Green's a great guy. I love the guy, But as the
Well, hey,
director,
now
you're
I, you know,
deeper in the woods.
let's just be clear here. I didn't say he wasn't a great guy.
I know.
You know, I like Peter. You know, as a person, I think he's fun to he's fun to be around. He made me laugh quite a bit on set, and there were even some lines that I came up with that some Peter isms that I probably occasionally use to this day. It's just that there were times that were very challenging, and as a director, like that shit's gonna happen, and you gotta kind of wade through it all. But at the end of the day, we got the movie shot, and there's still, but like I said, guys, there's still just so much meat on the bone here. I haven't really talked much about the crew here. Brendan Maxham is another guy that I brought on. Again, Oz and Robert were just so cool to let me kind of have the comfort of working with a lot of people that I trusted. And having Brandon Maxim there, who had actually just filmed he just was the DP on the documentary Knockout Blonde that I had mentioned. I was coming fresh off of working on a project with him, so it was really nice. But there's a lot to say on this one. Like, there's some I got some funny stories about some stunts that went maybe not so great. I've got some funny stories about just being in Pennsylvania. I've got a couple of nice little Doug Sackman stories to share. Like I told you, on the Doug Sackman episode, that was episode 83. Phil Rush, who was my first AD at the time, just met him in Pennsylvania. He brought Doug on, and then Phil, myself, Doug, we went on to work on so many projects. And look who just chimed in. There he is. What's up, Chuck? Charles Harris is on the line here. Charles, let me tell you something. I met Charles and I right away, like, this is the great thing about acting. And I hate to do this because I use so many sports references, but I'm going to use another one. To me, watching an actor act is like me being a professional baseball scout and I'm at the ballpark and I'm watching a pitcher warm up and I got my little radar gun out and I'm watching him throw the pitch. And I can tell by about 3 or 4 pitches if he has major league stuff. It's just up. It's reading 97 on the gun. Great movement. Can paint the corners. This guy's great.
An
When I saw
actor.
Charles, when I saw Charles Harris act, it was very evident that like I said, like that baseball scout watching him throw the ball. Like after a couple lines of dialogue, I was like, all right, great, this guy's good. Because I didn't know Charles. He was one of these guys that I didn't cast. He was already part of the project. Robert and Oz kind of brought him in. So I didn't know how he was gonna play the game, and I was very, very impressed with what he did, and that's why went on to cast him a couple other times, and hopefully we'll be joining forces together
He,
again real soon.
Charles is the gentleman that had kind of an extended verse Hitman scene with Peter's character in the kitchen. Am I correct?
Yeah, he runs one of the crews that's assigned to go after the Mick. And yeah, there's a little gunplay. There's a little bit of a dust up. I don't want to give it away. You got to watch it on Tubi and see how Charles did. But yeah, we had a lot of fun working together on that one. And I don't think I think our journey has just begun, brother.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the movie. Tommy, we'll save it for next week, I guess. But one of my favorite little making the trickisms here is that I didn't get to work with him. We weren't in the same scenes together. But just to say that I was in a movie with a leading cast member of my favorite all-time sitcom of all time. The guy that was a great influence on me, Larry, the crazy friend next door with the sweaters and the 70s pants and looking after Janet and Chrissy and everybody else, Terry the nurse, Larry, uh,
R-
Robert
You must
Klein
be
is his
talking
name.
about Richard Klein, brother.
Richard
Richard
Klein. I
Klein.
always get him
Yeah.
mixed up with the comedian Robert Klein, but Richard Klein, they're not related, I don't think.
You
But
love him so much you don't even know his first name. I'm just kidding.
well, Richard Klein, to me, is an American icon. Larry, the neighbor on Three's Company, I think he was there the whole show. I mean, so it's basically him and Jack and Janet were the only OGs on the Three's Company run. But Richard Klein, not Robert Klein, I'm sure he's heard that before. But Richard Klein as the head of police, right? The sheriff or the head of the
Yeah,
police.
he was the chief of police in this one, and I got a Richard Klein story for you that I'm going to share for part two because I've decided we're definitely coming back next Tuesday to wrap this up with a part two because there's just too many great stories to tell. I don't want to leave any meat off the bone, and also I think you had a great idea, Mike. I think that as many and action people that we can get to watch Making the Trick this week on Tubi. Maybe next week we can have a little bit more of a open discussion. And just to give you the heads up, we're going to be back at you live next week, Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on my YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe. I'm getting very close to 2 million total views on my YouTube channel. I want to say I'm like less than 15,000 views away. So if I post one good cat video, that might just be enough to get me over. So let's see what happens. Maybe next week we'll be up over that. But if you haven't, subscribe, hit that notifications bell, and we appreciate everyone hanging in. I feel like this hour flew by today, Mike.
Yeah, well, I want to say hi to Charlie Short Films. He chimed in. Tommy,
Yes.
I've been doing my artwork, buddy. I look forward to talking to you next week. But I'll let you, MikeMessier.com, if people want to follow me, stand me on social. But good to see
Support
Charles.
the arts. Support the arts.
Support art, if nothing else. Screw everybody else. But Kim Kaling, Charlie Short Films, Charles Harris, and if you guys can copy and paste the URL into your social medias, we appreciate it. But I look forward to talking more about the Making the Trick next week, Tommy, because there's more Irish meat on the bone.
Oh boy. Well, Charles, thanks for joining us today. It was really cool to have we got a couple of the actual Mick cast members hanging with us on the show today. Hope to see you next week when we get into it even more. And we appreciate all you watching. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye, guys.